Who's happy to be here at Comic-Con? Right? Oh my gosh. It's been 2 years, I missed it. My name is Henry Barajas. I have the honor of moderating the Path to Equality through Latina Superheroes. Our moderator, Frederick L. Aldama, sadly could not make it here. Don't worry, he's still alive, but please look up his work. Eisner Award-winning author and educator. I have the honor of talking to some of the few and the best in the industry when it comes to diversity in comics. And let's introduce the star, Caden Phoenix, the creator of La Brava. Please give a round of applause. We also have comic book historian, and she is self-proclaimed the only one available this weekend. Jessica Tseang, is that how you say it?
Jessica Tseang.
Tseang. Give it up for Jessica Tseang, please. And we got another author here, Kevin Garcia. Give it up for Kevin. Author of the Zorro book, right?
It was a book about Aztec history.
Yes, there we go. Everyone, please, Phoenix, Caden, please introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Caden Phoenix. I'm a third-generation Chicana from East LA. And thank you, Henry, for my intro. I have a Latino superhero graphic novel series called A La Brava. So it's a universe of Latino superheroes. They're each origin stories, and each one tackle a different social justice issue that deals with females.
Very excited. And down the line, Jessica, please.
Hi, I'm Jessica Tseang. I'm an international comics historian, and I am very, very honored and blessed to be asked to come. Thank you very much, Caden. I've been on Robert Kirkman's AMC Secret History of Comics, and I do a lot of public speaking, and I've been fortunate enough to be asked to go to comic conventions internationally and kind of, I would say, talk about how amazing the medium is, and that comics is more than just what we see here in the United States, but rather internationally. So I think it's very important. And Caden and I mentioned it, her series is one of the few, if not only, the Latina superhero universe together, much like the MCU, but she is able to create her own. So far, I haven't seen anyone like it internationally.
You heard it from a historian. All right, Kevin, what's up?
So, once again, I'm Kevin Garcia. I am a high school teacher. I've been teaching for about 16 years, so I'm officially been teaching as old as my students have been alive. I also have been a Marvel researcher. I've worked for the official handbooks of Marvel Universe for about 10 years. And this past year, I self-published a book called Tehuado, which takes place before the founding of the Aztec Empire. So it's a comic book that is just kind of proof of concept, doing this idea of the stories that aren't normally told. I'm also third generation from South Texas, and it strikes me always that there's a lot of mythology about Greek and Norse and other stuff, and I wanted to get that kind of epic history, but from Mexico.
Excited. Very cool. Caden, like we just stated here, that you are creating the first known Latina superhero universe. Talk about that. I know, why did you do it, and what inspired you to start doing that?
Why and what inspired me is because I come from writing and directing in the film industry, independent, so no one's seen my stuff, but I'm fairly new in it. And when I was thinking, okay, if I could write out any movie and I can sell it to become a movie, what would it be? And my first thought was a Latina superhero. And that's for the obvious reasons that we don't have one, right? That we still don't have one, unfortunately. Though we do have American Chavez, we do have little things coming, which is great, but where's our Latina superhero solo, right? Her origin story on the big screen. So that's what started me on the path. I wrote out a feature-length screenplay. I shot a short film, a sizzle, so I can show it, and try to pitch it. And every single person I showed it to asked me, where's the comic book? And every single time I said, there's no comic book, and there's no graphic novel. And it just literally no was my answer to every single person. And then it finally hit me that I should finally have a comic book, because that's what everybody's asking me. They thought it existed. And I was like, I guess it should exist. And so I pivoted this way to comics. I taught myself comics, you know, how to, you know, pencil, ink, color, letters. Like I literally taught myself the whole world because I don't come from that world. And that's why I started with Hubby School, my first one. And it just kept going, and they're just stepping stones. But I'm saying I'm circling it back for the same reason, so that I can make a TV series or a feature.
Who would want to watch a TV series with Latina? Yeah, everyone got their hands up, clapping. No racists here, good. Jessica, Jessica was nice enough to find me at Artist Alley, and we were talking, and I'd like to use this opportunity to talk about how incredible the year 2021 has been for Asian American comic book creators. And and it's for the worst reasons, I think, because of the rampant Asian American violence in this country. And one just really big example is Made in Korea. The book came out that came out this year, Jeremy Holt. Have you noticed an upward trend this year in Asian American stories, especially with the comic book medium?
I have. In May, it is AAPI month, so Asian American Pacific Islander month, and both DC and Marvel have their own anthologies and series dedicated to not only the Asian American characters that already exist in their universe, but also they brought in Monkey Prince, which is an iteration of the Monkey King, into the DC universe done by Jean Nguyen Yang, who does amazing work. There is definitely more of an awareness to that because of the unfortunate reasons that you had brought up, along with the fact that Shang-Chi was coming out in September, the film. So there was definitely a lot of push for it and a lot of awareness needed. And what I did find very interesting with that is when one ethnic minority group is elevated, the positivity does spread out to others. And so people will be like, this is Latin American, like Latin Heritage Month. We know that there's Day of the Dead, or there is Kwanzaa's coming. So there seems to be almost like a ripple effect, because people who are smart enough, when they start Googling, it'll spread out and then they'll look for other things as well. So there has been an uptrend for it. So we're hoping to make a silver lining out of something that was not great.
That's great to hear. And Kevin, as a Marvel historian, I guess looking through Marvel specifically, you can't exist in this world without Marvel. Are you, as a historian, happy to see that more often, or are you able to tell more history of minority characters in Marvel, or how is that affecting you?
Well, there have been attempts over the years, obviously, to increase diversity, going all the way back to the 60s. But when I say increase, that's like a little piece here and there and here, and then there'd be spurts of larger efforts. Marvel, a couple years ago, spearheaded a big effort of trying to get much more diverse characters. That's when America Chavez, who'd only been a couple years old at that point, they were really pushing her for her own book, and Riri Williams and Iron Man and other things to that. And of course, there was a large pushback from a certain sector of the fandom that felt that was not needed. But of course, thinking about Latina superheroes, one of the first things I thought of was, well, how many Latinas could I think of at Marvel? And there really aren't that many. Obviously America Chavez, she's going to be probably live action pretty soon. There's two characters called White Tiger, who their origin is they have these jade gems that have kung fu powers from China, so they are Puerto Rican American superheroes. There's also,
he's not joking.
For the record, I have a comic from the 70s where the original White Tiger is fighting Spider-Man, and he goes, "Beware my Latin power!" And I'm like, okay. There's also the current version of Spider-Girl is went by Aranya for a while, but then they had trouble. They figured people couldn't read the N-yes, so they decided to call her Spider-Girl. And there's also a character called Firebird, who is so stereotypically Catholic that she is offended by the presence of Thor and believes that her powers from space are from God. It's interesting. There aren't that many Latina superheroes in Marvel. We need a lot more of them. But that being said, you mentioned the AAIP month and the books they put out. Marvel, through the podcast and now through publishing, has been doing Marvel Voices, where each month they've been, well, not each month, but almost monthly, they've been putting out these ones where each one's kind of focusing on a community. So it'd be like African American Marvel voices, and they'd have Native American and so on. And I think that's been a big push, because they've been trying to find like creators from within the community to focus on characters from within the community, and then really push that. I think that's been helping raise awareness for some of these characters, because they're just, again, so few, and then with bringing new ones in and raising awareness of the ones that have been there, it really helps a lot.
Right. And circling back to Caden, I mean, you not being, not making these comics, maybe because there were really no comics for you to relate to. Also, stores, comic book stores, historically, now becoming more inclusive. Like for people like you and people in this room, has your mission, has it become easier? Is it harder? Like, where are you at in your journey of trying to fully realize a Latina superhero universe?
Well, I'm fortunate because I didn't grow up with comics. As you see all the examples there, it's a very great thing. But no, I grew up with movies and TV, and I'm a millennial, so I had all the 90s, right? So we had all the big blockbuster action films, and we also had all the great Disney films. And so if you look at my characters, they look very Disney, like aesthetically pleasing, Disney with the big eyes and the soft chins, but they will save the day, right? That's a blockbuster action movie. So you think like Gina Davis, or you think, like, I grew up with them. I say female, but like, that still counts for me, right? Like, that's still girl power. It's just, here's a Latina, right? Here's an extra layer, because we are just layers. And so those were my role models in regards to the media. And same thing, comics, I didn't read comics growing up, so I can't relate per se to comics. I say it pivoted. So for me to go in, it's very easy, because I still tell stories, because I watch movies, I watch TV, right? Those are stories, it's characters. We care about the character and what they have to overcome to win and to save. But really, they have their external powers, and they have internal, conflicts as well. So that's my base. My overall goal is, like I was saying, is to get into movies and TV. So it is working. My first one was Jalisco, and I got invited into Disney, Warner Brothers, so WAG, Warner Brothers, DTVA, Netflix, and Miramax. So like, it literally brought me right back in, which was my point. I'm not saying I don't like Comic-Cons. I love Comic-Cons. I used to always come to a comic, and I'm still here. I'm finally on this side of the table of the Comic-Cons. But it's not necessarily a means to an end, but it's a wider scope that I can reach through comics and through TV and film as well.
Great. Jessica, you mentioned that Caden's accomplishing something incredible.
Yeah.
Is there, in your knowledge, anyone that you can remember that are Latino or people in this space that have made some impacts in comics?
There is a lot of really amazing writers and artists. There's Veronica Gandini. She's down in South America, and so she can't come up, but she does a lot of great work for DC and Marvel. So a lot of them are actually more behind the scenes, and I think they wait for moments like yours where they can write and they can draw, and they actually would have a bigger voice in it. And it's something that they kind of, they really voiced in concern, because they really want to see a greater representation. Because if you're asked to be the colorist or the inker and everything, you only have so much say in something, so they wait for the day that they can be able to have more input into it. Because I can't imagine what it's like coloring or inking and being like, but that's not what we look like, or that's not what we say. I wished I had more contact with the writer or with the editor to say, not all of us look like that, not all of us speak like that. So I think a lot of those are just kind of like Veronica, are waiting. They love the medium, but they're really kind of waiting for the day. A lot of it, most people ask, is more of the characters than the actual creators themselves, is actually what more people ask me about. Because I think in their mind the characters are more diverse, but all the creators might be, white.
I mean,
More or
if
less.
history tells us, as a historian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the white people did make these superheroes that we all love.
Yeah.
Kevin, you and I share an interest in Mesoamerican history. I create, plug in my own stuff, you know.
I was gonna say, you didn't actually use yourself.
Yeah, I try to be gracious and humble, very humble person. I have a comic called Helm Grey Castle, which I did a lot of Mesoamerican research on. What kind of research surprised you when you were learning about that history? And did you share the same experience as I did when I was making a comic called The Lost Mile, another plug for my book, that I did with Gonzo, who's sitting in the audience here. He often said we have the blood of the indigenous and the conqueror. I'm messing that quote up really terribly. But did you have that kind of like, oh wow, there's so much that was kept from me? Or I wasn't, you know, this is information that you thought you should have known all along?
Well, one of the things that I look at a lot is I love looking at comparative mythology, and I love my love for sci-fi and comics and that kind of thing. I feel is kind of tied into that mythology idea, this kind of like modern myth making. But one thing I notice is when people think of mythology, when I say people, I mean the general American pop culture, tends to be Norse, tends to be Greek, especially Greek. And if you go through a lot of those stories, women are not treated well through all of it. And one thing I found interesting is going through a lot of Mesoamerican mythology, you don't find that kind of like disenfranchisement of women to be as prevalent. Aztec mythology, for example, there were 5 Earths, and each Earth had a different like person that was like a god that was kind of in charge of it. And the Earth before this one was run by a goddess, and it was no different from it being run by a god. It wouldn't matter. And I say god and goddess is not really in the same sense as the Greek version of most of us are familiar with, but the point is there wasn't that kind of, you know, throwing aside that women have their own choices to make. You know, like, whereas in Greek it's like, well, you're here now, so you're now part of the family, we own you. And that was not part of that at all for Mesoamerican mythology. Whereas like, for a lot of Greek and Roman stories, when they're modernizing, they're like, well, they didn't really kidnap her, they really secretly fell in love. When those stories don't need to be covered up as much in Mesoamerican mythology. It was like they really was about her choice and that kind of thing. And I found that to be a lot more interesting. Pavlova, for example, if you were to read it chronologically, the earliest part of it is about a female who is pregnant, trying really hard to find a place where she can be safe. And it is her, it's kind of up to her to make that happen. So I really love that idea.
Nice. Caden, you have been collaborating with a number of people of color, one notably who is a friend and I'm a fan of is Ava Cabrera. Tell me about how you work with brown artists to realize your story, and how much input do they have, and what is that process like? Because I think with superhero history, Marvel and DC own those characters. So like if someone were to make a Batman story and a character for that story, the company owns it. Are you kind of pushing against that with your superhero line, or how do you approach this differently?
In that sense, I do own it. Everyone is a work for hire, so I do hire my artists, I do pay my artists, but it is a work for hire. So if I'm hired by a studio to write something, the studio owns the property. Same idea. So in that sense only, I'm in Marvel. I do not take their ideas, so that's where I differ from Marvel, because I do create my own characters. I do write my own characters as well, the stories and all that. I do listen to them in regards to how they look. I have everything written down, but obviously, like, my penciler is the first one that touches it, and so she's just like, I'm gonna give her bigger eyes and more jaguar because she's Chicana. Sure, that sounds amazing, do it, right? Like, so there were certain ideas, absolutely go for it. I do horrible sketches, like very stick figure sketches in regards to what they're wearing. If the artist wants to elaborate it and make them better, sure, please do. You know, like, it doesn't hurt. Like Eva Cabrera, she does her own thing. Eva Cabrera, she is actually the Jalisco. She does the Archie comics, the Veronica and Kim comics. She has a very specific style. She's the one that did Santa for me and Loquita, so 2 of my books. And it's very much more on the anime side. So same thing, really huge, huge eyes, very pointy chins. That was my only note for her, was soften the chin, because I like more on the Disney style and that aesthetic. Manga is still very pointed. And so, but she's same thing. I do my rough storyboards as well. I am a horrible artist, which is why I draw, have amazing artists, but I do stick figures. And I do the panel sizes, and here's the lettering, and here's the word, so they know they don't have to do background, right? Anything to make it easier for them, I will absolutely do it. But I say, here's a pitch, here's a two-shot, here's a medium. And if they want to change the angle, be like, sure, please do, make it better, why not enhance it? But it is a collaboration in that sense. They can't necessarily change the story because they are not the writer. They're just an artist, whether it's pencil, ink, color. In regards for colorist, I go over a palette. So all of them, they're all very distinct and different heritages and different locations at the same time. But like Santa, I don't think you can see, but Santa is cold colors because everybody fights each other. So it's baby blues, baby pinks, baby yellows. Whereas Jalisco's warm colors, so reds, yellows, oranges, because everyone's really warm to each other, right? And supernatural, you get the supernatural colors, and there's also the Miami colors, right? The purples and the greens. And then so my muted colors is my Western, my cowgirl. That's Manita Huayca, she's a cowgirl. So they all follow their suit, they all follow their themes. So for the colorists is for me the most fun because they get it and they just make it better because that is their world, that's what their talent is. But I do help set it on their way, of course, because I am at the end of the day the publisher and the editor and everything else in that sense. I don't know what your question was, though. I'm just getting rambling.
I don't know either.
As long as it was answered, that's all.
No, you did. No, you're collaborating and you are doing something that's, a lot of publishers don't do is get people of color, Latina, Latinx folks to work on these books. So.
Absolutely. And my test is, when anyone ever says that, it's like, name a Latina artist. And then I wait, because nobody can name a Latina artist besides you, Tseang of Cabrera. But nobody can. You can ask me, name a female artist, I can say Jen Bartel, and that's Sally, the only one that I know. Right? And she has really great colors. But that's it, she's a cover artist. But that is the whole point, that's how you name an Asian artist. I cannot, I failed, right?
You did? Jen Bartel, isn't she Asian?
I have no idea. And so, but I hope so.
I don't know. I don't want to assume anyone's gender or nationality.
I had that same problem like about 5-10 years ago. Somebody asked me to put together a panel to discuss Latina kind of topics, and we were like, well, we have like 3-4 men on this panel. We need a woman on this panel, and I was upset at myself that I could not name a Latina artist or writer at that time. So then I made it kind of my goal to start no, I need to find more people to get a better list of people to have on these panels and not just have the same group of people every time. Even though just Latino itself is trying to show a bit of diversity from what a lot of the comic industry would see, that's not enough by itself.
Yeah, definitely. Jessica, I have a question for you.
Okay.
There is a lot of crossover with Mexican and anime. A lot of anime gets shown in Mexico. Do you know, or have you ever seen that kind of crossover of Mexican artists kind of adapting that anime style?
Yes, I have seen it. A lot of it actually do hail from Texas. You said South Texas, I was like, I know. And they're there because I think a lot of it is, other than the love of anime and manga, and also, because that's just international. So every country kind of has artists and creators their own version, but it is similar to anime and manga. A lot of it is also done in culture. I am going to butcher the words, but lucha libre, sorry. They're really big there, and it's like their own version of heroes, and it's very fantastical and it's amazing. And that type of mentality crosses over into anime, into comics, into manga. So there's also a way to pay homage to the love of it. Texas Latin Comic Con Expo is actually run by Hector Gonzalez Rodriguez. He does El Paso, he does a lot. He also spoke about, he goes, first of all, we're not all Zorro. Okay, we have other heroes. They also have their own publishing company. And he does say that other than Western style, a lot of their artists also do really love anime and manga style as well, but kind of with their own spin and their own twist on it. So it is appreciating the culture on both sides. And there's a lot of that.
As you're saying that, it makes me realize, while in a lot of US geekdom got anime really, really big toward the tail end of the 90s, and especially all the way through the 2000s, there were a lot of anime shows that were not translated to English very common, but were translated to Spanish and throughout Latin America. So I have a lot of friends from Mexico, artists and writers, who grew up, like they're my age, and they grew up with a bunch of anime shows that I'd never heard of because they just weren't released in the US in English. And I just, maybe that's part of that. Maybe that just made me think that maybe that's connected to that idea. There's so many anime-inspired artists in Latin America.
And also, it's about the geography. You're always really excited to see your hometown, your country, featured in a medium. Except for Los Angeles, our streets are never that empty. Don't know why we always portray it. But with Cowboy Bebop, even in live action, there's Tijuana. Granted, it didn't really look like it was very diverse in the background, but they were excited because I have friends from Mexico who's like, oh, Tijuana is mentioned in the first episode of Cowboy Bebop in the live action for this one. And then they'll go back and then they'll revisit the anime.
Definitely. And I do want to note that Frederick Aldama was the curator of a really amazing anthology called Tales from La Vida, which features a lot of Latinx, Latino people that are artists and writers in that book. So if you're having a hard time thinking about an artist or writer that is Latino or Latino, check that book out. So many amazing names from that. Caden, so you said you have a new book coming out, and that's at LA Comic-Con, you said, right?
Yeah.
That's in a couple weeks, so if anyone's coming to LA, tell us about it. What do you got cooking up?
That's next week, actually. So
Is it next week?
Yes. But LA Comic-Con is next week at the LA Convention Center. It's formerly Comikaze, and before that it was Stanley Comic-Con. But it's really amazing at the convention center. And Madruga, she's my fourth superhero out of the five. There's five total. They become a team, so there's really 6 books in volume 1. But she's my fourth one. She's my Chicana, my Estela Chicana, my Chola, which is where I'm from, Estela Chicana. I am not a Chola, but that is the stereotype that I've got my whole life. I have no tattoos. I purposely do not wear hoop earrings for that reason. And so her thing, like obviously she has a social justice that she actually saves the kids from child trafficking. But, and you know, she actually goes to Barrio Logan as well, because I am very fond of Barrio Logan in San Diego. But she ends up, you know, here she sees this gentrified, she goes to Barrio Logan to save the kids against La Monja, just because the church gets away with lots of things with kids. And so that's the overall arc of it. It's fun. I enjoy all my things, but like her saying, like her colors are very rich colors, right? Because you think of Chicana culture, you think of 90s, really like 90s Chola culture, right? We're very rich and vibrant in our colors. We're silvers and golds and just really popping greens and stuff. And so I take that stereotype of how much I have been stereotyped my whole life, and I still get asked really horrible, dumb questions in that sense. And so I was like, fine, here's your pit bull, here's your lowrider, right? Here's a Pachuca, because that is a nod to my history. You know, and there's little things about it. Actually, Barrio Logan, I love Barrio Logan with all the murals, because that is East LA, where I'm from, Boyle Heights as well, just a different parallel. So I do take everything that I've known growing up with as a Chicana and infuse it. That one's the most infused.
Well, the night is young, and we haven't opened up questions from the audience, so you probably will get a cool question, you know,
Okay.
if you're lucky. So Jessica, you are a historian. Is there anything you're working on right now or at least anything that's happening that in the comics history-wise? I love comic book history. I'm that guy that read Comics Journal as a kid and Wizard and has done a lot of self-educating because there's no real school for it. But what is piquing your interest at the moment?
Actually, a lot of it is you actually talked about Marvel Voices. I'm interested to see, I hope not the ending, but the progression of where they're going with the different Captain Americas. There's Captain Native America, there is an LGBTQ Captain America. There are all of these amazing characters, and then in Marvel Voices, they have indigenous voices with Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas. You know, they're writing Red Wolf, and also all of these amazing characters. I don't want to see them as a one-off, or their single issues or their solo titles didn't sell, so they had to cancel 10 issues in. I want to be able to see that have the longevity, my hope one day, of a Batman issue like 947, but also the fact that you can see them in live action one day. I did, for Comic-Con this year, in the summer edition, I did interview Taboo for San Diego Comic-Con, and he says, you know, I think it's gonna be a progression. We started with Black Panther, you know, then we have Shang-Chi. It's gonna take a couple years, but I do think eventually one day we will see a Red Wolf. We will see Captain, you know, Native America. We will see all of these characters. It will take time, that incline going up. I've also noticed that having, you know, Jessica Cruz or, you know, our current characters over, I think it has helped because for a long time, if you were to ask about Latina superheroes, they always bring back Tarantula, Catalina, in the early 2000s. I don't know if there's like children in the audience.
I think you're going from Marvel to DC, right?
Yes, Marvel to DC.
So
And-
DC is Jessica Cruz.
Yes.
Yes,
Right.
Jessica Cruz, yes. But with like the forward of having more Latina superheroes really helps erase badly written story points of Latina heroes or vigilantes or whatever, because whenever you bring it up, they always bring up Tarantula and Nightwing's controversy. So it takes time.
What is that?
We have one kid, we have two kids.
Well,
We have 2 children, so
Oh.
please Google.
Well,
And
I would just say that it was about consent, and Nightwing was on
Yes.
the negative end of that consent.
yes, so whenever you have that, they always use that as an example, and it's very irritating because as ethnic minorities or women, if it's not written well, like we're always remembered for the real negative impacts because we are made an example of. So it took a while, and now we have Jessica Cruz, who is so amazing, her story is amazing, and so her being there in DC is slowly helping erasing the mindset of the people who remembered what Tarantula did, because to a lot of people, it's just a Latina character, so therefore y'all one and the same. It's taking time, and so I do think it's very important to have like consult with those who know the heritage and are of that background to know what you write and what you draw needs to be very important because you're part of comics history, and once you do it and it's not done well, that character will always forever to be remembered in a negative way.
And then to go with that, success is having the freedom to fail, right? So we do one bad thing or one controversial thing, and you're like, oh no, Latino's done, right? Why? Because that gives the patriarchal oppression in place. That is really it, you know? If any white guy makes a movie and it bombs, who cares? He can do another one. There's a countless list of them. They will get rehired. Unfortunately, we have to always be great, right? Work twice as hard to make half. That is where we are at. Female and honestly, everyone marginalized as well. You know, just all the extra layers that we get, and that is what we're all fighting against. My books, particularly as well. You know.
Do you have anything to add to that, Kevin?
About which part? We covered like 3 different topics.
There you go. We're coming up at the halfway point, so I'd like to open up the audience for questions. I do have a bunch of questions from the previous panel that I can ask, like this one. What is the most unconditional love you've ever experienced?
No, that's a question. No, audience questions. What? There you go.
Hi.
Hi. Hello. Okay, so I have a question for Caden. I have read your book. I'm very excited to after. But you know, when you were talking about not growing up with reading comic book titles and reading comic books and coming to this as an adult, but also like deciding to focus on having superheroes in a team and kind of some of these tropes. I just kind of wondered about like when you were conceiving the idea, like, did you think I'm just gonna
Well, I come from screenwriting, so I create stories, and that is what I focus on. Obviously, like I was saying, like I grew up with all the blockbusters, but like Marvel started their, Marvel Studios, besides Coke, over and over. But like when they actually started with Iron Man, like those are great movies, right? Because I do follow the beats in that sense, because it's just a three story act structure as a screenwriter. So same thing, I do follow outlines. I'm very structured. Now me saying, oh, here's a female, here's a Latina, here's a location, that's not that hard. That's my world. That's all I know, honestly, is my world. Not that they're me, 'cause they're not, but it's not like, oh, how do you fight against the stereotypes? My mom's not a stereotype, my grandma's not a stereotype, my great aunts, none of us are stereotypes. It's just what the media tells me I am. So it's not that hard for me to combat it in that sense. But no, I do follow story structure. I'm very big on story structure. I outline everything.
So you ignored the cliches.
Exactly. I don't need the stereotypes. Yes, I ignore the cliches as well.
Got it. Anybody else have any questions? All the way in the back. With the head. And the cute kids. You should moderate this panel.
As the artists progress into more Black, brown, and Asian writers, how do you see the monetary side progressing? And then not just the monetary side, but people who review the comics as well. Because I find in films, one of the biggest problems with getting films out there is that the people who are reviewing them are still not reflecting the creators themselves.
Or the audience.
Yeah, I mean, there was a big conversation about how there was a majority, critics are like 90% men.
Probably
So,
white as well.
yeah, and white. So yeah, how do you battle that?
Well, that's a pipeline issue, honestly, right? Like, who's the reviewer, right? And who's the financier, right? Who's the one giving the money? Who's the publisher? So you think of any of that stuff, it's pipeline, but you need to work your way up. So if you're not the assistant, if you're not this, you're not the whatever, the associate, then the executive, and then the publisher, right? It's a pipeline. We don't have access to pipeline as easily as other people do, because it is about nepotism. It is absolutely who you know in regards to comic industry as well as entertainment, for sure, entertainment industry as well. So it's slowly but surely, right? Like I turn around, my whole thing is always turn around and bring 50 people with you if you can, right? So I turn around and here's all Latina artists on every single book. I have 4 books going right now. So I have 20 Latina artists working right now. They don't need to stay with me, but hopefully it gets them to the next level, right? Because that's a pipeline. And so that's always my hope, is always turn back around and bring them with you. Because if you're not gonna do it, why would a white guy do it? And so.
I was the other part about that is like we can support other kinds of reviewers to get them more attention as well. YouTubers, podcasters, bloggers. I was thinking right now, Comadres y Comics is a podcast that is entirely done by Latinas. My Primos is done by Latinos, but the idea is like there's a bigger diversity in terms of the people that could be analyzing and talking about the mediums as opposed to just the ones that are making it, because again, basically what I'm saying is we need more diversity all the way up and down that chain, from producers to the creators to the reviewers. The more diversity we have, the more it's going to become accepted.
And then,
No, it's okay. I was going to say finding allies is extremely important. We band together to help ourselves and to elevate each other. But in the US, it is still a majority of white Americans. There are so many allies there who really love and care for us, and they don't know how to help, or maybe they want to. It's unfortunate, we hope it changes, but people will tend to read a white male reviewer's review before anyone else. But if they genuinely believe in your work and they really love everything that you do, it helps, because they could be our support as we are doing the majority of it. It helps to have allies because they do have the privilege to be able to be listened to. So I do find that there are some really amazing people out there who ask, what can I do to help you out and to support you in a way that makes you feel comfortable? Also because I know that I have a huge platform, and I also want to talk about other things. And I want to talk about other diversity and inclusion in all the different mediums.
There you go. Okay, how many minutes? We still got time, huh? We got 10 minutes, all right. I saw you had a hand up, right?
Yes, I did. Actually, I'm just curious about what you see when the introduction of characters for new mediums, how they would actually put them into various things, making sure that it's like a kind of people of global majority, stuff like that, people who would be Latin, etc. When they put them into new mediums, such as how we had the Jon Stewart Green Lantern brought to the forefront. Are we also seeing that happen with Latin superheroes as well? And possibly, is that something you'd like to see as well?
So I think the question is, are we seeing more Latin characters in comics or just new medium in general?
In the new mediums that may have had their origins from comics.
So like Jon Stewart was used in the animated series instead of Hal Jordan, for example, so a whole generation of people watching Justice League growing up associate Jon Stewart. I don't think they've done that a lot with Latino and Latina characters yet. I do think that we're definitely going to see a movement towards that soon. When I was working with the handbooks, we get questions coming down from the producers saying, hey, the Marvel Studios wants to do some more Latina characters. Can you give us a list of Latina characters that did X? And we'd respond back that there weren't any. So then they would have to then create new characters for those mediums. But there's, I think we're going to see a change to that. I think just like Jon Stewart was used rather than Hal Jordan, we're going to see more of those.
Yeah. Gonzo?
I was wondering, like, I love your work, and I appreciate the way that you confront and dismantle kind of the white male monoculture of comics. But I was wondering, have you given any thought to how you deal with, like, we are also the culture that gave us the word machismo, right? It's very patriarchal. Have you thought about kind of pointing back on us as a people and confronting the kind of internalized patriarchy within our culture?
So that's I always tell people, decolonize your mind. So like Kevin was saying, machoism or sexism and all the patriarchal oppression is it's given to us from the colonizers. Like he was saying, the Aztecs, they treated us equal. Or even the Native Americans, honestly, everyone is equal. We didn't get that mindset until the Spaniards came. So that's why I always tell people, everyone, even myself, decolonize your mind, right? Because we are very colonized. We were grown, we were raised that way. That's what we see in media at the same time. So in regards to machoism, A La Brava, so the team book is called A La Brava. They actually go up against MRA. So the MRA are men's rights activists. And so them as a team come together to fight against them because the MRA is trying to suppress feminism, which is just equality of genders. It's a little bit political, as all my stuff are. Social justice has to do with the billionaires. There's a tax being imposed on the billionaires, which is actually very current right now. I wrote it like a year ago, but Bernie put in that tax, or put in that law, or trying to make the law as well. But everything kind of runs current, which I find very funny and interesting. But that is what A La Brava is about. They do just fight just to exist because somebody is slowly killing off all the females in offices and in political positions. So to hurry up and continue oppressing us, to be like, you're safer inside the kitchen or whatever.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, my first San Diego Comic-Con, and
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm not like deep into comics, but I will say, at least from like a mainstream perspective, even when I look at Latinos or Latinas being represented, I don't see a lot of people who look like me, and I consider myself Afro-Latino. So my question to all of you is, thinking about colorism and how rampant that is within Latina culture, how do you, and I don't know anyone's work, so I apologize ahead of time if this is something you're already working through, but how do you plan on making the Latina experience, the representation, more inclusive for more dark-skinned people, for a more diverse group of people, Latinas?
That's a great question. I have Bandita. She's my fifth one. She's actually one of my coolest, and they're all cool, but she's really cool. She's my Dominican gunslinger from New York. And so she has the fro hair purposely, like she literally has her curly hair. She's like saying, she's super cool. Like she's Southern hospitality set in a modern day New York. And she takes down a theater in Broadway. It's domestic violence, but it's a really strong piece. But she takes down a group in Broadway who's abusing the females or the girls there. So that one is mine. I can't get every heritage. I tried. Obviously I failed because I only have 5 characters. So I have my Chicana, I have my Tejana, I have my Mexicana, Boricua Cubana, and I have my Dominican. As of right now, I missed all of Latin America. But I do have a volume 2 coming out. So there can be new superheroes at the same time. So same thing, it is something that I have to be aware of, that my artists are aware of as well. I do know that same thing, they're raised as well the same way that we're seeing on media, like what colors they should see, and I was just like, no, make her darker. Yeah, I know, like, sometimes I say no whites, right, because we're in East LA, right? Like, there's certain rules that just make sense that I can get away with because it is comics, but it is, it is also, it's my job to be like, okay, I can do anything I want, let me try my best, but I can. So that's what I do because I have that power too, and tell my artists as well. So it does come through.
I need to pick up a comic.
Thank you, but I appreciate it.
Unless anyone wants to chime in, yeah, there is a major problem within the Latinx community of ignoring its Afro-Latinx folks. Growing up, yeah, I mean, the darker kids were treated poorly. And my family, I'm not afraid to say this, we're all pretty racist and very anti-black. So it is a daily, thing for me to include more Afro-Latinx characters and be more mindful of finding Afro-Latinx creators and storytellers, and just keep doing that going forward because the community can splinter, and it's important to try to be more of an ally, like Jessica was saying. So, one last question, unless anybody else wants to chime in.
No, I was just going to say really quickly, something that you had brought up was also, when you speak about the character, it only takes a couple seconds where Miles Morales, some people will be like, he's a black Spider-Man, or he is a Latin Spider-Man. You can just say both words. It doesn't take that long, and that makes an imprint in a person's mind.
Yeah, definitely. Last question.
For Kevin Garcia, as an educator, do you see a shift in the materials that are being brought into the classroom as recommended or acceptable reading? Because I remember in school it's very Eurocentric and also very outdated. So I just wanted to know if you see a shift.
So you're asking if there's a shift in the representation you're seeing in the books. This is a discussion I've had in my classrooms. Most of the changes seem to come from the teachers themselves very often. My students last year were having a big discussion about what is the literary canon. And that is like, what are the things everybody's supposed to read? And it's just, they tend to be, well, the stereotype of old white men, And the thing is that there's a bigger variety. Like if we're looking at F. Scott Fitzgerald, why not W.D. Du Bois? Why not from many different areas? You know what I mean? And for my students, there's been a request for that. Like they want to see more of it. And honestly, a big part of that has been pushes for modern, both young adult fiction and comic books. I've had a lot of my students asking about a variety of comics. One thing I noticed, a lot of my students this year are all reading Webtoon, which is a Korean app, but has creators from all around the world. So there are a lot of, like I've been reading some Webtoons that are from Argentina, that are from Mexico, from other areas, that are on this same app, and that's what the kids have been picking up and reading. So to answer your question, we're still pushing. I'm from Texas, so we're still pushing to get more variety from what is coming down from up above, but the individual teachers are definitely pushing for it, and students are definitely asking for it, so it's definitely there.
Well, that is, I'm getting the get out of here sign. I'll punch you in the face. But please give a round of applause to people here that help us and that volunteer in the year of quitting. People are working for free. Thank you all so much. Please, round of applause for panelists, for yourselves. We'll see you at Comic-Con in July. Thank you so much.
Thank you.